Very much. Thank you for with us today. And we are now looking at a live protest on Capitol Hill, the debate continuing over whether to confirm Judge Brett Kavanaugh. It's continuing out there in front of the Capitol as we are joined by NBC News political reporter Ali Vitale, who's been out there with the protesters, Charlie Sykes, contributing editor at the Weekly Standard, and MSNBC political contributor, and Jeffrey Goldberg, editor-in-chief of The Atlantic, who had a lot of the newsmakers sitting down with him today and was making news himself all week at the Atlantic Forum. Ali, first to you, the protests continuing, are they discouraged by Jeff Flake signaling that he is going to likely vote in favor of Judge Kavanaugh, which means that between now and 3 o'clock is the last moment that they will have to really have an impact on Susan Collins and what could be the decisive vote?
Andrea, what we heard from folks here is immediately after Susan Collins made that vote, there were cheers for Lisa Murkowski, and then there were people coming up to us saying that they were really disappointed that Senator Susan Collins, in their words, wasn't listening to women and wasn't kind of siding with women on the Kavanaugh vote. I think that generally here, what's been interesting to me is that as much as protests have kind of moved this process along, you talk about Jeff Flake being confronted in that elevator that in part prompted him to push for that FBI investigation and the pause button. The protests have had an impact, but at the same time, the folks who I've spoken to here have said that they really do believe that at the end of the day, Kavanaugh is going to be confirmed. The thing that they do say that they're sure of is they're voting in November. And when you look at people like Joe Manchin, Heidi Heitkamp, Joe Donnelly, they're people who are up for re-election in tough states, states that the president won, where their electorate might want Kavanaugh to be confirmed. Obviously, some of those senators have come out on the no side. Everyone is looking at Joe Manchin. So maybe the protests here are not going to have that impact, but certainly come November, voters will.
And we had protesters inside as well at the elevator before this procedural vote today. They were surrounding Susan Collins as she was getting on and off the elevator inside the Capitol itself. Charlie Sykes, in Wisconsin, how energizing is this issue? Because we've seen in the polling, at least, that it has narrowed the gap, that Republicans, in terms of their enthusiasm for their candidates in the midterms, has gone up and has narrowed the gap, and it's basically within the margin of error with Democrats who had a big lead before this.
Yeah, there's no question that there's a Kavanaugh bump. Conservatives have rallied around Kavanaugh, you know, this is one of those rare moments where even anti-Trump conservatives seem to have gotten on board. But I wonder whether or not it's going to be a sugar high rather than a game changer, because as we've seen, we have a short attention span in American politics these days, and I'm guessing that whoever loses this vote this weekend will have the rage edge. If in fact Judge Kavanaugh is confirmed, I think that Democrats are going to be highly motivated. Maybe Republicans are going to feel a little bit more happy and complacent. So they will have that rocket fuel of anger, which is the ultimate voter motivation. But we don't know. Remember, like 2 years ago this weekend, remember we had the Access Hollywood tape come out with Donald Trump talking about what he could grab, and we saw how that played out. And it does strike me that the Republican rationalization to support Kavanaugh is very similar to the Republican rationalization 2 years ago to support Donald Trump.
And to Jeff, who interviewed Lindsey Graham today, Jeff Goldberg at The Atlantic, you had a very angry Lindsey Graham. That's the Lindsey Graham we saw at the Judiciary Committee. The passions on both sides over this are something we haven't seen in a long time here on Capitol Hill.
Right. You know, I was surprised by it, but I was also not shocked by it. I was surprised because it's Lindsey Graham and because we've become accustomed over the years to the Lindsey Graham who with Hillary Clinton, Lindsey Graham, who's the wingman to the iconoclastic John McCain. But this was Lindsey Graham, who was representing the very, very strong feelings of his base in South Carolina. This is a Lindsey Graham who understood that the Republicans, Republican rank and file, are highly motivated by this. This is part of the culture war. This is part of the war in their minds for the soul of America for the next 30 years. This is not to say that he doesn't feel this as well, but I think he is a very political creature, like everyone on the Hill. ago, and he understood just how motivated people were by this. I think Charlie has an interesting point, though, which is to say, if the Republicans win this, some of that rage will dissipate. Rage becomes joy, but then it dissipates, and then the Democrats might have the edge because of this issue going into November. But right now, the Republicans are unified and enthusiastic and angry, and I think Lindsey Graham was channeling that.
And what do you think the impact of all of this is on Susan Collins as we count down towards her decision at 3 o'clock?
Well, you know, I mean, I don't know. I only understand this directionally, which is to say the following. If a Republican doesn't go with Kavanaugh right now, given the height of emotion, given the state that we're in, that person's not going to have a wonderful or easy future in the Republican Party. So the pressure on her from that direction has got to be something north of intense.
Well, Jeff Goldberg and, of course, Charlie Sykes and Ali Vitale, thank you all so much as we continue to count down towards 3 o'clock today, when we're going to know one way or the other what Susan Collins is doing, which could well decide the future of Judge Kavanaugh and this critical nomination to the Supreme Court. Coming up, mind the gap with political tension.